The oil lamp flickered beside an empty plate, and Marlena Cross sat alone at a table set for two. One chair for her, one for a ghost who'd been dead 7 years. Outside, the wind had claws. November in the Iron Ridge Valley meant snow by morning, and she could smell it coming. That sharp edge, that hush before the white. 12 rooms in this house, 40 head of horses in the barn, 600 cattle across 2,000 acres. And her at the head of a table built for 8, staring at a plate no one would touch. She didn't eat. Hadn't yet. The ritual came first. Light the lamp. Set his place. Sit and wait. For what? She couldn't say anymore. Forgiveness. A sign. The sound of his boots on the porch. Maybe. Though she knew he was ash and bone in a graveyard plot. 3 weeks dead before she even got the letter. Forgive me, Mama. Those were his last words to her. Written, not spoken. She hadn't earned them. The knock came soft. Too soft. A child's hand maybe. Or the wind playing games. Then again, harder. And a voice, small, shaking, barely loud enough to hear through the door. Please, Tim. It's cold. 2 boys stood on her porch, one holding the other upright, both blue-lipped and shaking. The older one spoke first, voice steady despite the trembling. We don't need charity. Just a place to warm up. We'll be gone by morning. Marlena didn't move. The cold poured in around them, biting at her stocking feet, but she barely felt it. She was looking at the smaller one, 7, maybe 8, his eyes half closed, his weight sagging against his brother like a feed sack about to split. The older boy tightened his grip. 11, 12 at most. Thin coat patched at the elbows, no gloves. His knuckles were raw and red, and he held his brother the way a man holds a child he's been carrying too long. Please. The word cracked. He hadn't meant to say it. He's just tired. He'll be fine when he's warm. Behind her, the lamp flickered on the table. The empty plate gleamed. She stepped aside. Get in. The older boy hesitated. Smart. He'd learned not to trust open doors. But the little one shivered, lost body heat, a sharp rattling exhale, and that decided it. The older boy half carried, half dragged his brother across the threshold, and Marlena closed the door against the wind. The warmth hit them like a wall. The little one made a sound, not crying, not laughing. Something between. And his knees buckled. His brother caught him, barely. The fire. Marlena said. She was already moving. Get him by the fire. She didn't help them, didn't touch them, just built the flames higher, feeding split oak until the heat pushed back against the cold they'd brought in. The older boy lowered his brother onto the rug near the hearth, and the child curled there like a dog finding sun. Marlena brought blankets. Didn't ask where they'd come from, how long they'd been walking, why 2 boys were alone on a night that would kill grown men. Questions could wait. Cold couldn't. His hands. She gestured at the little one's fingers, white at the tips. Warm them slow. Rub too hard, it'll hurt worse. The older boy nodded. He knew. He'd done this before. She watched him work. Gentle. Practiced. The kind of careful that came from repetition. And something shifted in her chest. Not warmth. Not yet. Recognition, maybe. The look on his face was one she knew. The look of someone holding together what wanted to fall apart. She went to the stove. The soup was leftover, rabbit and root vegetables made 2 days ago for no one in particular, but it was hot, and she ladled it into 2 bowls without asking. When she turned back, the little one's eyes were open. He was looking at the table. At the empty plate across from her seat. Is that for the angels? Marlena's hand stopped halfway to setting down the bowls. Darius. The older boy's voice was sharp. Warning. Hush. But the child kept looking. His voice was dreamy, half asleep. Mama said angels come on Thanksgiving. They sit at the tables of people who are sad. Is that their plate? The fire crackled. The wind pressed against the windows. Malina could feel the older boy watching her. Tense. Waiting for her to throw them out. She set the bowls on the table, not near the empty plate on the other side. Something like that. The older boy's shoulders dropped a fraction. Relief he didn't want her to see. You hungry? She asked. No, Automatic. A lie so practiced it came out smooth. Malina almost smiled. Almost. That's so. 'Cause I got more stew than one woman can eat, and it'd be a shame to waste it on the hogs. She pulled out a chair, then another, sat down at her usual place, and started eating. Not looking at them. Giving them room to decide. The older boy moved first. He helped his brother to the table, got him settled, then sat himself. Straight back. Hands in his lap like he was waiting for permission. Eat, Malina said. Before it gets cold. They ate. The little one, Darius, his brother had called him, kept glancing at the empty plate, at the lamp burning beside it. He didn't ask again, but his eyes held the question. Malina didn't answer it. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, the silence at her table didn't feel like death. It felt like waiting. By morning, the snow had buried the road, and Malina told herself she was only keeping them because they couldn't leave. Not because she couldn't bear to watch them go. She woke before dawn, the way she always did. The fire had burned low, and the two boys were still curled on the rug where she'd left them. The younger one tucked against his brother's chest like a kitten seeking warmth. She watched them for a moment from her chair. She'd slept there. Hadn't meant to, but her body had decided for her. And something in her chest tightened at the sight. Don't. She stood quietly, moved to the stove, and started the morning's work. Coffee first, then biscuits, then bacon from the smokehouse. The familiar rhythm of it steadied her. This she knew. This she could do. The smell woke them. The little one stirred first. Darius, she remembered. His nose twitching like a rabbit's. He sat up slowly, blinking at the room. At the fire she'd rebuilt without waking them. At her standing by the stove with flour on her hands. You make biscuits. Somebody's got to. He smiled. A real one. Unguarded. The kind children give before they learn not to. It hit her harder than she expected. The older boy, Marcus, woke with a start, his hand shooting out to find his brother. When he felt Darius beside him, he relaxed. Then he saw Malina, and the weariness returned. Not fear exactly. Calculation. He was measuring her again, the way he'd done last night. Smart boy. Don't trust easy. There's water in the basin, she said, not looking at him. Wash up. Breakfast in 10 minutes. They ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Probably hadn't. Malina watched them from the corner of her eye. The way Marcus cut his biscuit into precise halves. The way Darius stuffed his hole into his mouth and then looked guilty about it. She refilled their plates without asking. Thank you, Marcus said. Formal. Stiff. The voice of someone trained to be grateful whether he felt it or not. Darius looked up at her, cheeks bulging. These are good. Don't talk with your mouth full. He swallowed. These are good, he said again, clearer now, and grinned. Something flickered at the corner of her mouth. She killed it before it could become a smile. Snow's deep, she said, turning to the window. Road won't clear for a day or two. Maybe more. Marcus's hand stilled on his plate. We can leave as soon as. Didn't say you had to leave. The words came out rougher than she intended. She softened. Barely. Said the road won't clear. You stay till it does. Work for your keep. Work. Marcus straightened. I can work. I'm good at cleaning and mending. And I can cook some. If you show me where things are, I'll manage. She stood, took her plate to the basin, kept her back to them so they wouldn't see her face. The way her jaw was tight. The way her hands weren't quite steady. 2 days. Maybe 3. Then they go. That was the deal she made with herself. That was the lie she needed to believe. The day passed in small negotiations. Melina gave them tasks, stacking firewood, sweeping the floors, sorting dried beans, and Marcus threw himself into each one like his life depended on it. Which maybe it did. He understood that kind of work. The kind that says I'm worth keeping. Don't send me away. Darius was different. He wandered. Touched things. Asked questions that had no safe answers. Why is this room locked? He stood at the end of the hall. Small hand on the door she hadn't opened in 7 years. Melina's voice came out flat. Because it is. But. Darius. Marcus appeared behind his brother, took his hand, pulled him away. Leave it alone. The boy went, but he looked back over his shoulder at the door. And Melina saw the question he didn't ask sitting plain on his face. Whose room? What happened? She turned away. Later, in a moment she didn't expect, Darius had found the woodpile by the back door and decided he was going to help. He grabbed a log nearly as big as his torso and tried to carry it to the stack by the fireplace. 3 steps in, he dropped it. It clattered against the floor, rolled under the table. Melina looked up from the harness she was mending. Darius froze, waiting for the yell. You're smaller than the wood, she said. He blinked. What? The wood. It's bigger than you. She set down the harness. Try the kindling over there. The small pieces. He stared at her. Then a laugh broke out of him, sudden, startled, like he'd surprised himself with the sound. Marcus appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, face tight with worry. He'd heard the clatter, expected the worst. But there was nothing to see. Just Melina pointing at the kindling pile and Darius trotting over to it, still giggling. He's not in trouble, Melina said without looking up. Marcus didn't answer, but she felt him watching her differently now. Less like a threat. More like a riddle. Evening came slow, the way it does when snow presses against the windows and the world outside disappears. Melina set the table for dinner. 2 plates. For herself, and she stopped. The boys were in the other room. She could hear Darius humming some tuneless song he'd probably learned from his mother. Marcus's quieter voice correcting him on something. Her hand hovered over the cabinet where she kept Theo's plate. The same plate she'd set every night for 7 years. White ceramic. A small chip on the rim from when he dropped it as a child. She'd yelled at him for that. Stupid. Such a stupid thing to yell about. She took out the plate, set it in its usual place. But her hand was shaking. They ate in the glow of the oil lamp, the fire crackling low, wind moaning outside like something lost. Melina had made stew again, venison this time, with potatoes from the root cellar and wild onion she'd dried last summer. The boys ate slower tonight. Not starving anymore. Just hungry. Darius's eyes kept drifting to the empty plate. You can ask, Melina said quietly. She didn't know why she said it. Marcus shot his brother a warning look, but Darius was already leaning forward. What was his name? The lamp flickered. Shadows jumped on the walls. Melina set down her spoon, looked at the plate. At the chip on the rim. Theo. Coffee's on, Melina said. Good. They went inside. Riverbend stopped 3 steps past the threshold. The boys were at the table. Marcus helping Darius with his letters, scratching them into a piece of slate Melina had found in the barn. They looked up at the stranger, and Darius's hand found his brother's under the table. Riverbend looked at them, then at Marlena. One eyebrow raised. "They're staying," Marlena said. "Till the snow clears." "Snow cleared yesterday." Marlena didn't answer. Riverbend walked to the table, lowered herself into a chair across from the boys with the gravity of a woman who'd learned to make every movement count. She looked at Darius's slate. "Your letters are good," she said. "Better than my granddaughter's were." Darius's fear melted. "You have a granddaughter?" "Had. The government took her. Sent her east to learn to be white." She said it without bitterness, which made it worse. "She writes to me sometimes. Her letters are full of English words I have to ask the trader to read." Marcus's hand tightened on his brother's. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. Riverbend looked at him for a long moment, then she nodded. "You know what it is to lose family." It wasn't a question. Marlena brought the coffee, set a cup in front of Riverbend, another at her own place. The boys had gone back to their letters, but quieter now. Listening. Riverbend sipped, said nothing for a long while. This was their way. The silence that came before words. The patience that settlers had never learned. "Finally, you are different." Marlena stiffened. "How's that?" "Less dead." She didn't know how to answer that. Didn't try. Riverbend looked at the table. At the empty plate, still in its place near the lamp. "You still set the plate?" "Yeah." "But you moved it." Marlena's hand tightened around her cup. She had moved it. Just a few inches. She hadn't thought anyone would notice. "The dead don't eat," Riverbend said. "But the living do. And you have living mouths at your table now." From the corner, Darius's voice, "Is she talking about us?" "Hush," Marcus said, but he was watching the two women. Reading the currents he couldn't name. Riverbend stood. Slow. Deliberate. She had said what she came to say. Maybe not all of it, but enough. She walked to the door, then stopped. Looked back at Marlena. "He was not yours to keep," she said. "Theo. None of our children are. We only walk beside them for a while." She glanced at the boys. "These two are walking now. The question is whether you will walk with them or let them pass." She left. The sound of her horse's hooves faded into the snow. Marlena sat with the words. They sat with her. That afternoon, Marcus found her in the barn mending a bridle that didn't need mending. "Can I ask you something?" She didn't look up. "Depends." He leaned against the stall door, arms crossed. Protective. The way he held himself when he was about to ask something that scared him. "You built this ranch yourself?" "Most of it." "It's big." "Real big." He paused. "You built it for your family?" Her hand stilled on the leather. "That was the idea." "What happened to them?" The question landed soft, but it cut deep. She thought about lying. Thought about telling him it was none of his business. Thought about all the ways she dodged this question for 7 years. "My husband died when Theo was 3, she said. "Fever." Same thing that, she stopped. Started again. "I raised him alone after that. Thought I was doing right. Building something for him. A legacy." She paused. "But I was building it for me. Telling myself it was for him when really she set down the bridle. I didn't know how to be soft. Didn't know how to say the things he needed to hear. So I built fences and barns and told myself that was love." Marcus was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was smaller than she'd heard it. "My mother was sick for a long time. I tried to take care of her. Thought if I did everything right, she'd get better." A pause. She didn't. Marlena looked at him. Really looked. And saw what she'd missed before. Not just a boy carrying his brother, but a boy carrying a guilt he'd never named. That wasn't your fault, she said. Wasn't yours either. They stood there in the cold barn, breath fogging between them. And something passed that neither of them could have spoken aloud. Recognition. The terrible comfort of meeting someone who'd failed the same way you had. Snow's clearing, Marcus said finally. The road to town's probably open by now. Probably. We should go before we're more trouble than we're worth. Malina picked up the bridle, turned it over in her hands. Supper's at 6, she said. Don't be late. She didn't look at him. Didn't have to. She heard him exhale, shaky, like he'd been holding his breath for days. Then his footsteps retreating through the barn door. When he was gone, she set down the bridle. Her hands were trembling. That night, Malina checked on them before bed. The fire was low. The boys curled together under the quilt she'd given them. Another one of Theo's, pulled from the chest she hadn't opened in years. Darius was asleep, but Marcus's eyes were open, watching the flames. You should sleep, she said from the doorway. I know. She turned to go. Ms. Cross? She stopped. Thank you, he said. For letting us stay. She didn't know what to say. Your welcome felt too small. Don't mention it too dismissive. Get some rest, she said. Plenty of work tomorrow. She went to her chair, sat in the dark, listening to the fire settle, the wind push against the windows, the soft sound of Marcus's breathing as he finally let himself sleep. On the table, the lamp burned low. The empty plate caught the light. But tonight, for the first time, Malina wasn't looking at it. She was looking at the door where the boys slept. Malina found the ribbon hidden in Marcus's coat pocket. Blue silk. The kind they sold at the general store in town. And something in her went cold, the way it had the night Theo walked out. She hadn't meant to find it. She'd been hanging the coats by the door to dry after the boys came in from the snow, and her hand had brushed something in the lining. Instinct made her pull it out. 7 years of living alone had made her suspicious of hidden things. The ribbon lay across her palm. Fine silk. The kind that cost real money. The kind a boy with nothing shouldn't have. Her mind went to the only place it knew how to go. He stole it. Marcus was in the kitchen helping Darius dry the breakfast dishes. He turned when he heard her boots on the floor, and his face went white when he saw what was in her hand. Where'd you get this? Her voice came out flat. The voice she'd used with ranch hands who lied to her. The voice she'd used with Theo the night he left. Don't lie to me. Darius shrank back against his brother. He'd heard that tone before from other men in other places. None of those memories were good. Marcus's chin came up, defiant, but his hands were shaking. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She stepped closer. Tell me you didn't take it from someone. From a store. A house. I didn't steal it. Then where'd it come from? Boys like you don't have silk ribbons. Boys like you don't have anything unless. She stopped. The words hung in the air between them. Ugly and sharp. Boys like you. She saw Marcus flinch. Saw the armor go up. The same armor he'd worn that first night when he'd stood on her porch and said, "We don't need charity. We'll be gone by morning." He grabbed Darius's hand, started for the door. Marcus, Darius's voice was thin with fear. But it's snowing. Marcus, it's snowing outside. I know. He kept walking. Darius stumbled, trying to keep up, looking back at Malina with eyes that didn't understand. She stood frozen, watching them go. The same way she'd watched Theo go. You're doing it again. The thought broke through the ice in her chest. You're letting him walk out. You're letting them both walk out because you're too proud to be wrong. Wait. Marcus didn't stop. She moved faster than she'd moved in years. Caught up to them at the door, put her hand on the frame before he could pull it open. Wait. Please. The word felt like glass in her mouth. She couldn't remember the last time she'd said it. Marcus turned. His eyes were wet, but his face was stone. You want to know where I got it? His voice cracked. I got it from my mother's hair the day she died. It was the only thing I could take. The only thing I have left of her. Melina's hand dropped from the door. I kept it hidden because people take things from orphans. Because every place we've stayed, someone's gone through our things. Someone's always looking for a reason to call us thieves, to throw us out, She stopped, breathing hard. Darius was crying now, silent tears running down his face. I've never stolen anything in my life, Marcus said. Except. The word hung there. Except what? She looked at him, and in that moment, she saw it. The same weight she carried. The same guilt he'd been hiding behind duty and work and keeping his brother alive. Nothing. He pulled Darius closer. Forget it. But Melina had heard the catch in his voice. The way the word accept had torn out of him like a confession he hadn't meant to make. There was something else. Something he did. Something he thought was unforgivable. She looked down at the ribbon in her hand. Blue silk. The color of grief. The color of a son's memory. Not evidence of crime. Evidence of love. And she'd treated it like proof of everything she feared. The silence stretched. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, that low moan through the eaves that meant more snow was coming. Melina held out the ribbon. I'm sorry. 2 words. They cost her more than he'd ever know. Marcus stared at her, then at the ribbon. His hand trembled as he took it back. You thought I was a thief. I thought. She stopped. What had she thought? That he was Theo? That history was repeating and she had to stop it before it destroyed her again? I don't know what I thought. I was wrong. You were. No forgiveness in his voice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He tucked the ribbon back into his pocket, the same hiding place, because where else was safe, and walked back to the kitchen. Darius followed, glancing back at Melina once with eyes that held something new. Doubt. That night, they ate in silence. Melina served the stew. The boys ate. No one spoke. The empty plate sat in its place, and the lamp burned steady, but the warmth that had been building for 3 days was gone. She'd broken something. She didn't know if it could be fixed. After dinner, Marcus took Darius to their corner by the fire. He didn't look at Melina. Didn't say good night. She sat at the table alone, staring at the lamp. Except. The word kept turning in her mind. I've never stolen anything. Except. What had he stolen? And why did he carry it like a wound that wouldn't heal? She thought of Theo. Of the letter he'd written. Forgive me, Mama. He'd asked for forgiveness. She'd never given it. Never had the chance. Don't make the same mistake. She looked at the boys by the fire. Marcus's back was to her, his body curved around his brother like a shield, protecting Darius from the cold, from the world, from her. He's not a thief. He's a child who loved his mother enough to keep a piece of her. And whatever else he'd done, whatever that accept meant, it was eating him alive the same way Theo's letter had eaten her. Melina stood, walked to the window, looked out at the snow falling through the darkness. Tomorrow she would ask. Tomorrow she would listen. Tonight she stood watch over 2 boys who didn't trust her anymore and wondered if this was what grace felt like. Not the receiving, but the chance to give it, even when you didn't deserve to. That night, Marcus told her the truth about his mother. And Melina understood finally why she'd been so quick to accuse him. She saw her own sin in his eyes. The fire had burned low. Darius was asleep, curled under the quilt by the hearth, his breath slow and even. But Marcus sat apart, knees drawn to his chest, staring at the embers like they held answers he couldn't find. Melina watched him from her chair. The distance between them felt wider than the room. She should go to bed. Should let the silence do what silence does. Harden into habit. Into the kind of cold that becomes comfortable because at least it's familiar. That was what she'd done for 7 years. That was what she knew how to do. But Riverbend's voice was in her head. The dead don't eat, but the living do. She crossed the room, sat on the floor across from him. Not close, but closer than she'd been all evening. Marcus didn't look up. You don't have to tell me, she said. What you started to say earlier. About the accept. I know. The fire popped. A log shifted, sending up a small spray of sparks. But I want to know, she kept her voice low, careful. The way you speak to something wounded. If you want to tell me. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Mama was sick for almost a year. Coughing sickness. The kind that doesn't get better. He picked at a thread on the quilt. We didn't have money for a doctor. We barely had money for food. But there was a woman in town. A doctor who had medicine. Real medicine. The kind that helps. Melina waited. I watched her office for 3 days. Learned when she left, when her husband went to market, when the door was unlocked. His voice was flat now. The voice of someone reciting a confession they'd rehearsed in their own head 1,000 times. I went in through the back. Took a bottle of the medicine. Got out clean. He finally looked at her. His eyes were dry, but there was something shattered behind them. I got caught anyway. Not by her. By her neighbor. He saw me leaving. Told the sheriff. Word got around. What happened? What always happens? A bitter laugh, too old for his years. They said we weren't welcome anymore. Said they couldn't have a thief in their town, around their children. We had to leave. He turned back to the fire. It was the middle of January. Snow on the ground. Mama could barely walk, but we couldn't stay. So we walked. 2 days. 3. I don't remember anymore. His voice cracked. She died on the road 2 days after we left. Froze to death in a barn outside of Redstone while Darius and I slept next to her, trying to keep her warm. The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. So yes. He looked at Melina again, and now there were tears. Not falling. Just there, held back by sheer will. I'm a thief. I stole medicine to save my mother, and she died anyway. And it was my fault. Melina didn't speak. She couldn't. The story sat in her chest like a shard of glass, cutting deeper with every breath. Because she knew this story. She knew the shape of it. The weight of it. The way it wrapped around your bones and wouldn't let go. I tried to save him. He died anyway. It was my fault. She'd told herself the same words every night for 7 years. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Quick! Angry at himself for crying. You wanted to know. Now you know. He stood. We'll leave in the morning when the snow clears. Sit down. He froze. Please. Her voice came out rough. Sit down. He Saturday. Not because he trusted her, but because he was too tired to fight. Melina stared at the fire. The words were somewhere inside her. The words she'd never said. The story she'd never told. She could feel them pressing against her throat like water against a dam. Tell him. Tell him you know what it's like to carry a death you didn't cause but can't stop blaming yourself for. She opened her mouth. He died of fever. Marcus looked up. Theo. My son. She couldn't meet his eyes. Couldn't look at anything but the flames. He died of fever 3 weeks after he left home. The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. He left because of me. The words tore out of her, jagged and raw. I was cold. Hard. Spent all my time building this place. Building something I could leave him. And I never, she stopped. Breathed. Started again. I never told him I loved him. Not the way he needed. Not in words. I thought the work was enough. The ranch. The security. I thought he'd understand. She laughed. A broken sound. He didn't understand. How could he? I never explained. I just expected him to know. Marcus was watching her now. Not with suspicion. With something worse. Recognition. What happened? He asked. Quiet. The way you ask when you already know the answer will hurt. Melina's hands gripped her knees. Knuckles white. He was 16 when he left. We'd had a fight. I don't even remember what about. Something small. Something stupid. He said I didn't see him. Said I looked right through him like he was just another fence post on this goddamn ranch. She closed her eyes. She was right. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, the wind moaned through the eaves. That low, mournful sound that made the house feel like a ship lost at sea. I let him go. Told myself he'd come back when he'd cooled off. Told myself he was just being dramatic, the way young boys get. Told myself, her voice broke. I told myself a lot of things. None of them true. She opened her eyes, stared at the flames. He went to Ashford. Got work at a boarding house. I found out later he'd been sick for a week before anyone thought to send word. By the time the letter reached me, he was already in the ground. Marcus made a small sound. Not a word. Just a breath punched out of him. I never got to see him. Never got to say, she couldn't finish. The word stuck in her throat like splinters. I'm sorry. I love you. I was wrong. All the things she should have said. All the things he needed to hear. Buried with him in a cemetery she'd only visited once because she couldn't stand to go back. He wrote me a letter, she said. Before he died. I got it after. She reached into her shirt pocket, pulled out a piece of paper folded so many times the creases had worn soft as cloth. She didn't open it. Didn't need to. She knew every word by heart. Forgive me, Mama. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's what he wrote. Forgive me. Like he was the one who'd done something wrong. She finally looked at Marcus. Tears on her face now. The first she'd shed in years, maybe ever, in front of another person. He didn't need forgiving. I did. And I never got the chance to tell him. The fire had burned down to coals. The room was darker now, shadows pooling in the corners, the lamp on the table casting its small circle of light like a vigil flame. Marcus sat very still. Tears ran down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. I never said sorry to Mama either, he said. I was so sure I could save her. So sure that if I just got the medicine, if I just tried hard enough, his voice splintered. She told me not to. Before I went to the doctor's office, she said it wasn't worth the risk. She said she'd rather die than see me get in trouble. He wrapped his arms around himself. I didn't listen. I thought I knew better. I thought. You thought you could fix it. Melina's voice was raw but steady. You thought if you loved her enough, if you tried hard enough, you could keep her alive. Marcus nodded. Couldn't speak. That ain't a sin, Melina said. That's just being a child who loves his mother. Then why does it feel like one? The question hung between them. Heavy as stone. Old as grief. Melina didn't have an answer. She'd been asking herself the same question for 7 years. But she said the only thing she could think to say. The thing she wished someone had said to her all those nights alone at this table, staring at an empty plate. Because we think love should be enough to save people. And when it isn't, we blame ourselves for not loving harder. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time since she'd found the ribbon, his eyes held something other than suspicion or hurt. Understanding. You were trying to save her, Melina said. That ain't something to apologize for. You were trying to build him a future, Marcus said. That ain't something to apologize for either. They sat there in the dying light of the fire. Two people who'd been drowning in the same water, finally finding something to hold on to. Melina stood. Her knees ached. She was getting old. Older than she'd ever expected to be. But the pain felt distant. Unimportant. She crossed to the table, stood over the empty plate, the lamp, the place she'd kept set for 7 years. Marcus watched her. I've been sitting at this table every night, she said, waiting for him to come back. Setting his place like he might just walk through that door. She touched the plate. The chip on the rim. Like if I kept the ritual going, it would undo what I did. Does it help? No. She almost laughed. No, it doesn't help. But I didn't know what else to do. She looked at him. At Darius, still sleeping by the fire, innocent of all the grief the adults carried. Riverbend told me something. She said I can't keep him. Theo said children aren't ours to keep. We just walk beside them for a while. Marcus nodded slowly. That sounds right. Maybe. Melina looked back at the plate. But I think she was also saying something else. That walking beside someone means being there. Being present. Not just building fences and calling it love. She turned to face him fully. I wasn't there for Theo. I can't change that. But I can. She stopped. The words felt too big. Too dangerous. You can what? Marcus asked. Melina looked at him. At this boy who'd stolen medicine for his dying mother and carried the guilt like a stone around his neck. At his brother who still believed in angels and asked questions no one could answer. I can be here now, she said. For whoever needs me to be. Marcus's breath caught. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Outside, the wind had gone quiet. The snow fell soft and steady, covering the world in white. And in the small circle of lamplight, two people who'd thought they were beyond saving sat with their grief and let it be seen. And found that the sharing made it lighter. Not healed. Not yet. But lighter. Melina stood on the porch at dawn, watching the snow erase everything, and wondered if a woman could be forgiven by someone who was already dead. The cold bit at her face, her hands, the parts of her she'd left uncovered. She didn't mind. There was something clean about it. The way the frost stripped everything down to what was essential. Bone and breath. Blood and silence. Behind her, the house was still. The boys hadn't stirred yet. Last night's confessions hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear, and she'd needed to get out. To breathe something that didn't taste like grief. The valley spread out below her, white and endless. The Iron Ridge Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks sharp against the sky just starting to blush with pink. Beautiful country. She'd built her life here. Carved something out of nothing. And for what? For him. For Theo. For a future he never got to live. She heard the crunch of snow before she saw the horse. Riverbend's paint mare crested the ridge, moving slow and steady through the drifts. The old woman rode the way she did everything. Without hurry. Without waste. Melina didn't move from the porch. Just waited. Riverbend dismounted, tied the mare to the post, climbed the steps. She stood beside Melina, looking out at the same mountains, the same snow, the same silence. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Riverbend said, "You told them?" "Yeah." "And they told you?" "Yeah." Riverbend nodded. Her breath fogged in the cold air, mingling with Melina's. "My granddaughter was sent to the school when she was 8, Riverbend said. Not looking at Melina. Looking at the mountains. They cut her hair. Took her name. told her the words she'd spoken since birth were the words of animals. Melina waited. I tried to stop them. Rode to the agency. Spoke to the men in suits. They had papers. Laws. They said it was for her own good. A long pause. I have not seen her in 6 years. She writes sometimes. Her letters are in English. Proper English. She signs them with the name they gave her. Sarah. What was her real name? Nupika. The Salish word sounded like water over stones. It means a little deer. Because when she was born, she had long legs and moved like she was always ready to run. Riverbend finally turned to face Melina. I tell you this not for pity. I tell you because I know what it is to lose a child who is still alive. And I know what it is to lose one who is dead. She paused. The wound is the same. The wondering. The questions that have no answers. Melina's jaw tightened. How do you live with it? I don't know. Riverbend's voice was quiet. Honest. Some days I pray. Some days I curse. Some days I do both. She looked back at the mountains. But I have learned one thing. Holding on to grief does not keep them close. It only keeps you far from everyone else. Riverbend left an hour later, the sound of her mare's hooves fading into the white. Melina stayed on the porch until her fingers were numb. Then she went inside. Past the sleeping boys. Past the table with its empty plate. To the end of the hallway. Theo's door. She'd stood here 1,000 times in 7 years. Hand raised to the knob. Heart hammering. Unable to turn it. The room was a tomb. A shrine. Opening it would mean admitting he was really gone. That the boy who'd laughed and slammed this door and filled these walls with life was never coming back. Her hand touched the wood. Cold. Smooth. You let him go once. You going to do it again? She thought of Marcus's face last night. The way he'd looked at her when she said, I can be here now. Like he wanted to believe her, but didn't dare. She thought of Darius, sleeping by the fire, trusting her even after she'd almost thrown them out. She thought of Riverbend's granddaughter. Somewhere in a brick building back east, learning to forget who she was. You can't save Theo. You can't bring him back. But you can stop using his room as a prison. She turned the knob. The door opened with a creak, hinges stiff from years of disuse. The air inside was cold and still. Thick with dust and the faint ghost of cedar. His scent. He kept wood shavings in a jar by the window. She'd never known why. Melina stepped inside. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The bed, still made with the quilt his father had sewn before he died. The book on the nightstand, spine cracked, pages yellow. He'd been halfway through when he left. Never finished. The pocket knife on the dresser, still holding wood dust in its grooves. She moved through the room slowly. Touching things. The knife. The quilt. The jar of wood shavings, the pieces brittle now, edges like paper. On the wall above his bed, a drawing he'd made when he was 10. Crooked lines. Uneven shading. The ranch at sunset. She'd told him to fix the mistakes. Make it neater. Do it right. He never had. That's what you remember. Out of everything, that's what comes back. Telling a 10-year-old his drawing wasn't good enough. She sat on the bed. The mattress sagged under her weight, the frame groaning softly. This was where he'd slept. Where he'd dreamed. Where he'd lain awake at night, probably wondering why his mother was so hard to please. I'm sorry. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. I'm sorry I didn't say it when you were alive. I'm sorry I let you walk out that door. I'm sorry I spent so much time building walls and fences that I forgot to build a home. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry I made you think you had to apologize to me. You didn't. You never did. She pulled out the letter, unfolded it for the first time in years. His handwriting, shaky. He'd been sick when he wrote it. Mama, I know you're angry. I know I shouldn't have left the way I did, but I couldn't stay anymore. I couldn't keep being invisible in my own house. I don't hate you. I want you to know that. I never hated you. I just wanted you to see me. Maybe one day, when I've made something of myself, you'll be proud. Maybe then you'll understand why I had to go. Forgive me, Mama, for not being strong enough to stay. Your son, Theo. Malina read the letter once. Twice. Then she folded it carefully and pressed it to her chest. I saw you, she whispered. I always saw you. I just didn't know how to show it. The room was silent. The dust motes drifted in the pale light from the window. She didn't know how long she sat there. Long enough for the sun to climb higher. For the shadows to shift. For the cold to seep into her bones. When she finally stood, something had changed. Not healed. Not fixed. But shifted. Like a bone finally settling back into place after years of being wrong. She looked at the room one last time. The bed. The book. The drawing with its crooked lines. The ranch at sunset. She'd thought her heart died with Theo. But maybe it had just been waiting. Waiting for someone to remind her it was still beating. She left the door open when she walked out. The carriage came up the road just past noon. Vivian Caldwell in her black coat, 2 county women behind her. And Malina knew this was the moment she'd been waiting 7 years to get right. She saw them from the window while she was washing the breakfast dishes. A dark shape against the white, moving slow and deliberate up the ridge. The horses were fresh, their breath steaming, and the carriage wheels cut clean lines through the snow. Official. Purposeful. The kind of arrival that meant trouble. Boys. Marcus looked up from the table where he'd been teaching Darius his letters again. Something in her voice made him freeze. Someone's coming. He was at the window in 3 steps. His face went pale. That's the county seal, he said. On the carriage. That's. I know what it is. Darius appeared at his brother's elbow. Who is it? Marcus pulled him back from the window. Protective. Automatic. Nobody. It's somebody, Malina said. And I'm going to handle it. She looked at Marcus. Held his gaze. Stay inside. Both of you. Don't come out unless I call for you. Ms. Cross. Marcus. Her voice was firm but not hard. Trust me. He stared at her for a long moment. Searching her face for something. A lie? A weakness? A sign that she'd fold the way everyone else had folded when officials came knocking. Whatever he found, it was enough. He nodded. Malina grabbed her coat, stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind her. The carriage stopped at the edge of the yard. Caldwell climbed down first. Tall, thin, her black coat buttoned to the throat despite the cold. Her face had the pinched look of a woman who'd spent her life disapproving of things and had gotten comfortable with it. The 2 county women stayed on their horses. Younger, broader. The kind of women who did what they were told and didn't ask questions. Malina. Caldwell's voice carried across the snow. Pleasant, almost friendly. The tone of a woman who believed she was doing God's work. Vivian. Caldwell crossed the yard with careful steps, avoiding the deeper drifts, preserving her polished boots. She stopped at the foot of the porch steps and looked up at Malina with an expression of practiced concern. Cold day to be standing outside. I've had colder. I imagine you have. Caldwell glanced at the house. At the windows. We've had word, Malina. About some children. 2 boys. Orphans, apparently. Word is they've been staying with you. Word travels fast. It does when people are concerned. Caldwell's smile didn't reach her eyes. An unmarried woman living alone, taking in young boys. Surely you understand how that looks. Marlena felt her jaw tighten. I understand how small minds work, if that's what you mean. The smile flickered. Hardened. These children are wards of the territory, Marlena. They need to be in the proper institution. The orphanage in Ashford is equipped to care for them. Schooling. Christian instruction. Eventual placement with suitable families. They're fine where they are. That's not for you to decide. Caldwell's voice lost its warmth. The law is clear. Orphan children without living relatives must be remanded to territorial custody. You have no legal standing to keep them. Legal standing. Marlena let the word sit in the air. That what you call it? I call it the law. And I call it women in offices deciding what happens to children they've never met. She stepped forward. Not aggressive. Just present. Taking up space. Those boys walked 3 days through the snow to get here. They were half dead when they knocked on my door. I fed them. Warmed them. Gave them a place to sleep. And now you're telling me I've got no standing. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. I'm telling you that your feelings don't supersede the legal framework of this territory. These boys need proper care. They have proper care. From you? Caldwell laughed. Short. Dismissive. Marlena, you've barely spoken to another human being in 7 years. You eat alone. Work alone. Live alone. You're not fit to raise children. You're barely fit to raise cattle. The words landed like a slap. And the worst part was, Marlena knew they were true. Or they had been true. A week ago, she wouldn't have argued. But that was before the knock on the door. Before Darius asked about angels. Before Marcus mended her coat without being asked. Before she'd sat in the dark with a boy who carried the same guilt she did and realized that maybe, she wasn't as dead as she'd thought. You're right, Marlena said quietly. Caldwell blinked. I'm sorry. You're right. I've been alone a long time. She stopped. Breathed. I've been holding on to something that wasn't there. Setting a plate for a ghost. Living like I was already buried. She looked Caldwell in the eye. But I'm not dead yet. And neither are they. Caldwell's expression shifted. The pleasant mask cracked, revealing something colder underneath. This isn't a negotiation, Marlena. I have the authority to remove those children. If you interfere, I'll have you arrested for obstruction. Then arrest me. The words came out steady. Calm. The voice of a woman who'd already counted the cost and decided to pay it. Caldwell stared at her. The 2 county women exchanged glances. Uncertain. You go to jail for 2 orphans you've known a week. I'd go to jail for doing right by them. Marlena stepped down off the porch. Closer now. Close enough to see the vein pulsing in Caldwell's temple. I spent 7 years doing nothing. Sitting in that house. Eating alone. Talking to ghosts. I let my son walk out the door because I was too proud to stop him. Too cold to say what needed saying. Her voice dropped. I'm not doing that again. Caldwell's jaw worked. She wasn't used to being defied. Not by ranchers. Not by anyone in this valley. She was the bank. The church. The committee. She was order. You're making a mistake. Maybe. Marlena shrugged. Wouldn't be my first. Movement at the door. Marlena turned. Marcus stood on the threshold. Darius behind him, clutching his brother's hand. I told you to stay inside. I know. Marcus's chin was up. That stubborn set to his jaw she'd come to recognize. But if she's going to take us, she should hear it from us. He walked past Melina, down the steps, stopped in front of Caldwell. A boy of 11, facing a woman with the weight of the territory behind her. "We want to stay." Caldwell looked down at him. "Child, you don't understand." "I understand fine." His voice didn't waver. "I've been taking care of my brother for 6 months. I've slept in barns and begged for food and buried my mother in a stranger's field because no one would help us. I know what we need." He glanced back at Melina, then at Caldwell. "And it's not a county orphanage." Darius stepped forward, still holding his brother's hand. He looked up at Caldwell with those wide eyes. The eyes that had asked about angels. That had seen the empty plate and understood something adults couldn't name. "She's not mean," he said. "She's just sad. But she's getting better." Melina felt something break open in her chest. Not pain this time. Something else. Something that felt terrifyingly like hope. Caldwell stood rigid. Her face had gone red, the careful composure crumbling. This is highly irregular. Your children. You don't get to decide." They just did. Melina stepped forward, putting herself between Caldwell and the boys. Not threatening. Just present. A wall. "And so did I." She looked at the county women on their horses. They hadn't moved. Hadn't reached for anything. They were watching with the uncertain expressions of women who'd signed up for an easy job and found something else entirely. "You want to drag 2 little boys out of here in the snow?" Melina asked them. "In front of God and everybody, because a paper says you can." One of them looked away. The other shifted in her saddle. Caldwell's voice was tight. "This isn't over." "Maybe not." Melina nodded. "You do what you need to do. File your papers. Talk to your judges. But right now, today, these boys are staying here. And you're leaving." A long moment. The wind picked up, swirling snow between them. Then Caldwell turned. "Walk back to her carriage." The county women followed, relief plain on their faces. At the carriage door, Caldwell paused. "Look back. You're not their mother, Melina. You never will be." Melina felt Darius's hand slip into hers. Small. Cold. Trusting. "No," she said. "But I'm choosing to be here." The carriage pulled away. The horses' hoofs crunched through the snow, fading into the white until there was nothing left but silence. They stood there, the 3 of them, watching the empty road. Marcus spoke first. "She'll come back." "Probably." "What happens then?" Melina looked down at him. At Darius, still holding her hand. "Then we figure it out together." Darius tugged at her fingers. "Does this mean we can stay?" She knelt in the snow, eye level with him now. This small boy who'd asked about angels and seen her clearer than she'd seen herself in years. "Yeah," she said. "It means you can stay." He threw his arms around her neck. She stiffened. Instinct. Old habit. Then she let herself soften. Let herself hold him back. Over his shoulder, she saw Marcus watching. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. Just barely. The first real smile she'd seen from him. "Thank you," he said quietly. Melina shook her head. "Don't thank me yet. I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do we." He almost laughed. "Maybe we'll figure it out together." She stood. Darius's hand found hers again. Natural as breathing. "Come on," she said. "It's cold. Let's go inside." They walked up the steps, through the door, into the warmth. Behind them, the snow kept falling. Soft and steady. Covering the tracks of the carriage. Covering everything. Starting clean. Thanksgiving morning broke quiet over Iron Ridge Valley, and for the first time in 7 years, Melina cross-set the table without shaking. The sun came up slow and golden, spilling through the frost-laced windows like honey, warming the floorboards where the boys had slept. The fire had burned low overnight, but she'd fed it before dawn, coaxing the flames back to life the way you coax something fragile. With patience. With care. With the understanding that warmth takes time. 3 plates. She set them out one by one. Her place at the head. Marcus to her right. Darius to her left. The empty plate, Theo's plate, with its chipped rim, was not on the table. She'd put it back in the cabinet this morning. Wrapped it in cloth. Placed it on the top shelf where she could still see it, still know it was there, but where it no longer sat in judgment over every meal. "You're not gone," she thought, touching the cabinet door. "I'm just learning to let you rest." The lamp stood in the center of the table, freshly polished. Marcus had done it again last night without being asked. Its brass base gleaming in the morning light. She lit it anyway, even though the sun was bright enough. Ritual mattered. But rituals could change. Could grow. This one had. Darius woke first. He came padding out in Theo's old nightshirt, hair tangled from sleep, rubbing his eyes with small fists. He stopped at the edge of the kitchen and looked at the table. 3 plates, he said. "That's right. 1 for me, 1 for Marcus, 1 for you." "That's right." He tilted his head, studying the table with the seriousness of a child working through a puzzle. "What about the angel plate?" Malina's chest tightened. She knelt down, bringing herself to his level. Something she'd learned to do this past week. Something that still felt new but no longer felt wrong. "The angel plate is resting," she said. "Up in the cabinet, where I can see it when I need to." Darius considered this. "Is Theo mad?" "No, sweetheart. I don't think he's mad." "How do you know?" She didn't know. Not for certain. But she knew what she believed now. What she'd come to believe in the quiet hours after Caldwell's carriage had disappeared down the ridge. "Because he'd want the table used," she said. "He'd want people sitting here. Eating. Being a family." Darius nodded slowly. Then his face brightened. "Wait here." He ran back to the corner where he and Marcus slept, rummaging through the small pile of belongings they'd accumulated. A pocket knife Malina had given them. A ribbon. A book of fairy tales she'd found in Theo's room and decided they should have. He came back holding something in his cupped hands. Small. Fragile. A wildflower, dried and pressed, its petals faded to a pale yellow, stem brittle as old paper. "I found it," he said, "before the snow. I was going to give it to Marcus for his birthday, but." He looked at the table. At the lamp. At the space where the empty plate used to be. "Can I put it here for Theo?" Malina couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around something. Not grief, not exactly. Something fuller. Something that ached in a different way. She nodded. Darius placed the wildflower beside the lamp. Careful. Reverent. The way you place something sacred. Then he stepped back and looked at it. "There," he said. "Now he knows we didn't forget him." Elijah appeared in the doorway. He'd been awake for a while. Malina had heard him stirring, but he'd stayed back, giving them space, watching the way he always watched, reading a moment before stepping into it. Now he came forward, his eyes moving from the table to the flower to his brother to Malina. "Darius," he said softly. "That's beautiful." "It's for the angel," Darius said. "So he knows he's still invited, even if he can't eat." Elijah's eyes met Malina's. Wet, bright. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They made breakfast together. Malina worked the stove, bacon, eggs, biscuits with honey from the cellar. Elijah set out the butter and jam and the good napkin she'd forgotten she owned. Darius's job was to keep the fire fed, and he did it with fierce concentration, carrying kindling in armloads almost too big for him. The kitchen filled with warmth, with the smell of food, with the small sounds of people moving around each other, learning each other's rhythms. This is what it was supposed to be, Molina thought. This is what I built it for. Not the house, not the ranch, not the fences and barns and acres of land. This. The table. The meal. The people sitting down together. They ate, not in silence this time. Darius chatted about the snow, about the horses he wanted to meet, about whether chickens could learn their names. Elijah answered his brother's questions with the patient half-attention of someone who'd been doing it for years. Molina listened, adding a word here and there, surprised by how natural it felt. When the plates were nearly empty, Darius looked up at her. "Ms. Cross? Yeah? Is this our home now?" The question landed soft, but it carried weight. The weight of 6 months on the road. The weight of barns and strangers and a mother buried in a field. The weight of every time someone had promised safety and failed to deliver. Molina set down her fork. "I don't know what's going to happen," she said honestly. "That woman, Caldwell, she'll probably come back. There'll be papers and lawyers and people telling us what we can and can't do." Darius's face fell. But Molina reached across the table, took his hand, then Elijah's. Both of them small and cold and trusting in her rough grip. "But whatever happens, you've got a place here. Long as I'm breathing, you've got a place. Promise?" Darius whispered. "Promise." Elijah's hand tightened around hers. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. After breakfast, they cleared the table together, washed the dishes, put everything back in its place. The wildflower stayed beside the lamp. Molina stood at the window, looking out at the valley. The snow had stopped falling. The sky was clear, sharp blue, and the sun turned everything to diamonds, the fields, the fences, the mountains in the distance. Elijah came to stand beside her. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For what you did yesterday." Standing up to her. "Didn't do much. Just stood there. That's not nothing." He paused. "Most people don't stand at all." She thought about that. About all the time she hadn't stood, hadn't spoken, hadn't done what needed doing because it was easier to stay silent. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what I said about the ribbon. For thinking." "I know." He cut her off, gentle. "I forgave you already." "When?" "When you opened his door." He looked at her. "That's when I knew you were different. That you weren't going to stay frozen." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Just stood there with him, watching the light move across the snow. That evening, as the sun sank toward the mountains and the sky turned to fire, Molina sat at the table with a cup of coffee and watched the boys play by the hearth. Some game Darius had invented with rules that changed every minute, and Elijah pretending to lose so his brother could win. The lamp burned steady in the center of the table. The wildflower caught the light, its faded petals glowing amber. She thought about Theo. About the letter. About all the words she'd never said in the years she'd wasted saying nothing. "I kept a chair for a ghost," she thought. "Turns out he sent me someone to fill it. 2 someones." She smiled. Small. Private. The kind of smile that costs something and gives back more. Outside, the first stars appeared. The wind had gone quiet. The house was warm. And for the first time in 7 years, Molina Cross wasn't waiting for someone who'd never come home. She was already home. They all were.